What is inflation and how it affects your daily life? Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a shop, pulled out a 100 rupee note, and realized it buys far less today than it did just a few years ago? That's not just your imagination. That's inflation, silently eating away at your hard-earned money. And if you don't understand it, inflation won't just make you poorer. It will control your entire future. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you'll not only understand inflation, but also learn how to fight it and win. Sounds scary? It should. But don't worry. I'll break it down step by step. Point 1. The hidden thief. Inflation is often called the silent thief. Imagine leaving 1,000 rupees under your mattress today. 10 years later, you still have 1,000 rupees. But it buys only half the groceries it used to. Without even touching your money, you've lost. That's the brutal power of inflation. So, unless you plan to eat fewer rotis and drink half a chai, you need to understand this monster. Point 2. What exactly is inflation? Inflation simply means the average price of goods and services rises over time. If onions cost 20 rupees per kilo last year, and 30 rupees this year, that's inflation. If petrol was 70 rupees a few years ago and is 110 rupees now, well, that's inflation laughing at your wallet. But here's the real twist. Not all inflation is bad. Shocking, right? Let me explain. Point 3. Good inflation versus bad inflation. A little bit of inflation is actually healthy. It shows the economy is growing. Businesses earn more, salaries rise, and people spend. But when inflation runs too high, like when vegetables or rent shoot up suddenly, it destroys savings, reduces purchasing power, and can even lead to economic collapse. So the next time someone says, "Oh, inflation is always evil," just ask them, do you prefer zero inflation and zero salary hikes? Exactly. Point 4. The root causes of inflation. Why does inflation happen? 4 major reasons. 1. Demand pull. Too much money chasing too few goods. 2-point cost push. When raw materials and fuel costs rise, businesses pass it on to you. 3. Government policies. Printing more money or high fiscal deficits. 4th. Imported inflation. Global oil or commodity prices shooting up. Sounds technical? Don't worry. Let me show you how this plays out in your actual daily life. Point 5. How inflation affects you daily. Every time you buy groceries, pay electricity bills, fill petrol, or even order Swiggy, you're paying the price of inflation. A middle-class family spends at least 20% more every 3 to 5 years without their income keeping pace. But honestly, how do you save when even Maggie isn't 10 rupees anymore? Point 6. Inflation versus your salary. Here's the bitter truth. While your salary may rise by 5 to 10% a year, inflation often eats up 6 to 8% of it, which means your real income is barely growing. That's why people feel they're working harder, but still stuck financially. But there's one way to actually beat inflation, and this is where smart people get ahead. Point 7. Beating inflation with investments. You can't stop inflation, but you can outrun it. Fixed deposits give 5 to 6% while inflation is often at 6%. That means you're barely breaking even. But investments like stocks, mutual funds, real estate, or even gold have historically beaten inflation. That's why the rich keep getting richer. They put their money to work. So the question is, are you letting your money sleep in a savings account while inflation works 24/7 against you? Point 8. Inflation and debt. Here's a fascinating twist. Inflation is bad for savers, but good for borrowers. If you took a loan of 10 lakh rupees 5 years ago, you're still paying the same EMI today. But the value of that 10 lakh rupees has fallen. In other words, you're paying back in cheaper money. That's why governments themselves love inflation. It reduces their debt burden. But wait, Before you rush to take a loan, here's the catch. Point 9. Hyperinflation, the real nightmare. If inflation goes out of control, it becomes hyperinflation. Picture this. In Zimbabwe, bread once cost billions of their dollars. In Germany after World War I, people carried money in wheelbarrows to buy basic items. Closer home in the 1970s, India faced double-digit inflation, and families struggled to survive. Could this happen again? Maybe. And that's why financial planning isn't optional. It's survival. Point 10. What you can do today. So what's the takeaway? First, track inflation. Don't ignore it. Second, don't let cash sit idle. Invest it smartly. Third, diversify. Never rely on one source of income. And finally, build assets that grow faster than prices rise. Because the truth is, inflation is here to stay. But if you prepare, it won't control your future. You will. And if you're wondering, okay, but what are the smartest ways to build wealth and beat inflation right now? I've got you covered. If you found this video valuable, make sure to check out my next video on real passive income ideas that actually work. It's packed with strategies you can start today, even with little money, to outpace inflation and build lasting wealth. Click on the end screen, and let's continue your financial freedom journey together.